I was thinking how nice it was that the storm is coming tomorrow. My name is Pam Bramble, and I am a professor here at the University of Connecticut and also the coordinating director of the Arts Project. Tonight's talk is just one of several events that we have happening here at UConn Torrington, so please come up and visit us whenever you have a chance. Tonight, artist and teacher Marlow Shami will discuss her work and her development as a visual artist and her sources of creativity. I wanted to just make a quick note about the Arts Project because there's something a little bit different that we do in comparison to some other artistic venues, and that is that we're very interested in the creative process. And obviously when an artist gives a talk and you have an opportunity to converse with an artist, they inevitably do talk a bit about their process. But one of the things that those of us in the Arts Project wanted to do was to present that visually and how to do that. The Whitson Gallery is uniquely designed so that we can show people a glimpse of some of the source materials, sketchbooks, preliminary sketches, early phases of a work of art, oftentimes stages of a work of art, if an artist is indeed willing to share that with us. And so what we do is we put up in the brick wall space finished works of art, oftentimes, and then as a complement we have things here in the Whitson Gallery that give you kind of a behind the scenes of what that process is for the individual artist. And we do feel that the artist's journey is unique, it is special, and it is something that all of us are really quite interested in. So I'd like to share a few biographical notes on Marlow Shami by way of introduction to her talk tonight. Marlow attended the Hartford Art School in the early 1970s and received her Bachelor of Fine Arts in Photography and Video in 1975. Upon graduation, she worked as a videographer and a still photographer for many, many years in the greater Hartford area. Ambitious and independent and talented, and I think it accurate to say that Marlow's life itself is a montage of original and enriching experiences. For instance, she attended Goddard's Community Media Program in 1977. She had a 12-year career working as an Emmy-nominated CBS News videographer and award-winning independent producer. As a freelance photographer and videographer, her varied clientele included Xerox and CPTV, St. Joseph College, Trinity College, a dance program, the Hartford Ballet, Edna and Travelers, and the Permanent Commission on the Status of Women. By the mid-1980s, she had received her Integral Yoga Teaching Certificate. In 1999, after completing the Touching Spirit professional program, she became certified in the science of energy medicine and the art of spiritual healing. She obtained her Master's of Science in Applied Ecopsychology and Integrated Ecology from Greenwich University. She has a Natural Systems Thinking Process certificate to teach. She was invited to be a participant at the practicum in mindfulness-based stress reduction in mind-body medicine at UMass School of Medicine. And since 1999, she has been teaching sensory ecology and healing workshops, and since 2009, has served as the manager for the artist, musician, comedienne, Nancy Tucker. She teaches, she creates art, and she continues her freelance work. She says that all of her experiences serve to guide her art-making process. Ms. Shami's work is at once abstract and realistic, reminiscent of mosaics with their multifaceted areas of color and fragmented imagery of nature, symmetrically composed, still yet energized. She says that, quote, a thread-like intelligence attracts my attention in the art-making process. These attractions are the foundation of my creative impulse, and they are everywhere. My job as an artist is to follow their pull, collaborating as best I can to reveal something new to both myself and for those who are experiencing my work. End quote. Ms. Shami's work has been exhibited throughout Connecticut and Vermont, New York, and in Nebraska. Her awards include a nomination for the Women in Communications Matrix Award, an Emmy Award nominee by the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, Boston, New England chapter, for a news series co-produced with Gail King, and the Montevideo Prize for Best Documentary, Coming Out of Violence. Born in New York City and currently residing in Goshen, Connecticut, we are very fortunate to have Marlow Shami here with us tonight.
Well, I'm delighted to have been invited to be part of this wonderful arts project. Thank you, Pam. And thank you so much for your help in the installation.
Oh, please.
So, good evening. Does everybody have a twig?
Oh, my twig.
Have one? Okay, I've got mine. I'd like you to take a moment to just scratch a bit off of it and take a smell. This is a black birch twig. It should smell sweet, and it's safe to chew on if you'd like. There's a little flavor to it. Some people actually take the sap from a black birch tree and, as you would with maple, make a syrup, but it takes some more sap, so you often will just find maple syrup, not black birch syrup, to pour on your pancakes. Let me move into a little sound here. The reason I'm asking you to experiment with this, with your senses, with a stick, it's an invitation to heighten your senses. Sensory connection with the natural world. And what you're hearing right now is recording katydids from my yard last summer. Sensory connections are the basis from which I create. And what I'm going to do now is read an excerpt from an essay entitled Red Ribbons and Reciprocity. This was published in an anthology, hi Jack, called Love Affairs with a Land. And the reason I share this excerpt is that I think it really conveys the source of my creative impulse quite well. And I'll be referring, this is the stone I refer to in the essay. We called it the highest house when I was a child. So let me read this to start with. This essay will bring you back to my world as a 6-year-old. The crackling aroma of dry oak leaves underfoot calls me back from an empty place of bewilderment. I start to cry, then laugh, as the white clapboard house I've been trying so hard to live in grows smaller until, thankfully, it seems to be consumed by dense green foliage. The sounds I make feel red and wrap around the trees, ride the wind, and usher me away from that ill-tempered house. Once in the forest, where soft, invisible eyes keep watch, I know what it is to be home. I reach my special dwelling place, an exposed 3-chambered bedrock outcropping, and slide my weary 6-year-old body into the welcome of the stone's interior. Nestling in, I open all my senses. The wind blows my brown bangs back and scatters a blanket of leaves across the forest floor. I follow the deep, mysterious crevice downward until I come to an opening. There I lay, face to earth, eyes shut, in a space between a red oak and a shiny black birch tree. A space between hardship and hope. My breath mingles with the soil, the acorns, leaves, and tiny wind-broken, lichen-covered branches. The swamp just down the hill is blinking with frogs. A deer cautiously moves through the mud. Cicadas pulsate, first 1, then 10, and in another few seconds the whole forest shimmers with their sound. A luminous wave of life flows over, then recedes through me. This is what it is like to be free. I roll onto my back and sigh as a huge cumulus cloud passes over. The shape of a horse grows out the side. Its tail turns into a large snake, which is consumed by yet another horse. This one's running. I break off a small birch stem and scratch the outer bark. exposing the bright green inner skin. I chew it. It tastes like bubblegum. This is what it's like to be alive. A faded red silk tie wrapped around the black birch catches my eye. The tie was a gift I offered the tree a few months ago in the spring. It was my way of saying thank you. So why did I fasten a red tie around that black birch tree? My father's Circassian. My father's side of the family come from the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. And one of the traditions the Circassians had was to tie a red ribbon around a birch branch and hang it in your house in order to ward away the evil eye. Another tradition was when somebody passed on in the family, the whole village would go up into the mountains and they collect birch branches, they bring them back to their home, and they tie red ribbons around them, decorate their homes with them. And then after a period of time, they'd take the branches, bring them outside, and burn them. And this ritual, they believe this ritual enabled the spirit of the dead to pass on, and in reciprocity, the spirit would watch over the family. Now, my father never told me about these traditions. He didn't talk about his culture. But I suspect it was either some sort of genetic imprint, some psychic imprint, maybe some other method that this memory was left in my body on a cellular level. I discovered it in research, basically. Research that was sparked by a dream. I would not have discovered this had it not been for the research I did. So, and it was a dream I had about 5 years ago, as I remember it. For me, the art making process is about returning home again and again and again. And for me, I have an inner compass that my senses guide. I follow the sensory attractions. What I'm going to do is continue. Let me begin. I'm going to talk about the two bodies of work in this show. They appear to be very different from one another. Visual memoirs are representational, figurative, and the restoration series is abstract. But really they do come from the same place, a longing to create a homeland, or discover homeland again and again. Let me give you a few samples of both bodies of work. So nature, when I use the word nature, Merriam-Webster defines nature as a controlling and creative force in the universe. So that's what I'm talking about. And I find my source material everywhere. I find it in the beauty of rural landscapes and critters. And I also find it in the urban landscape, in the buildings, the smells, the sounds, even the reflections in a dirty puddle in a Manhattan gutter. I'll find some sort of attraction, and basically I listen to the attractions. When I feel a certain pull that has a stronger pull than others, I'll follow it. That's that inner compass that's guiding me. And what I call this is sensory ecology, my relationship with what I'm attracted to through my sensory abilities. So I'm going to start with the visual memoirs. And I have two examples of how work begins. They always begin in a unique way. One was sparked by a synchronistic collaboration with somebody I hadn't even spoken to in 40 years. And the other was sparked by a dream. A girl's best friend. This is the finished piece, and that's the rock I referred to in the essay. That's the highest house. I was on Facebook once last year and discovered this woman I knew. She was a friend of my older sister, Martha Holden. And we started going back and forth on Facebook. And by the way, in back here in one of the cabinets, you'll see our dialogue, bits and pieces of it, cabinet on the far right. But it turned out that Martha traversed the same woods I explored, and she in fact knew this stone, along with a lot of the glacial erratics that were lying around, that are lying around the woods. So we decided we'd spend a month and work on our own pieces based on source material that I provided. So I went back, this image will, let me just show you a few more shots of the stone, this beautiful bedrock outcropping. It's a nice wide shot. I go back every year, different times. This was a summer visit. The work the pieces, the photographs that I shot for the pieces that Martha and I created actually were shot in January of last year. I'll show you those. It's just a gorgeous stone. And here I am posed with the rock, just to give you a sense of the scale. So I took a number of in-focus shots for us to work with, and also a number that I abstracted by using slow shutter speeds and playing with my zoom lens. You could tell by the quality of light that these were shot late in the day in January last year. So this is what we worked with. And what I'd like to do is describe, some of you have asked, well, how do you cut and place these many pieces together? I'll discuss the stages of development of Girl's Best Friend, along with a little bit about my toolbox. I use Photoshop. I shoot with a digital camera, so I take my pictures and then I connect my camera to the back of my Mac. This is my computer, and I use a program called Photoshop, which literally lets me cut and paste my photos as one would if they were working with a montage, layering pieces of paper and other kinds of material in order to create effect. In fact, Photoshop will label, I can label the photographs myself, or it would label them as layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can see too that I was able to erase part of this layer to reveal some of the layer behind it. So Photoshop allows me to cut and paste various segments of individual photographs and also erase. So this is one of the first attempts I made in creating a Girl's Best Friend. I'll show you a few more steps. I found a slide my father shot of me when I was probably 2. And what I did was I erased everything, including Spotty, my first dog. And also, I just have to show you this. The highest house is actually right over here. It was not far from my home, right on the horizon there. So I got little Marlow in and continued to work with the various photographs. We call them files, digital files. Blending, erasing, adding, layering, until I found what I wanted. And here, let me think. Do I have Martha's? Here's Martha's piece, entirely different. Martha worked with, this is 18 by 30. She used Conte, graphite, terps, and various brushes. So, I've kept dream journals for over 30 years. I find dreams to be a source of inspiration. I've worked on and off with a Jungian analyst who also is a Rubenfeld synergist. For those of you who aren't familiar with Rubenfeld synergy, it's basically somebody who can work with energy that one's body has retained, having to do with past experience earlier in life. So she's a brilliant analyst and really helped me. It became an alchemical process for me. And I learned a lot about myself, and a lot of transformation goes on that is sparked by dreams. So this is the piece, a visual memoir that was sparked by a dream. It's entitled Homelands 1. And in the dream, my father appeared. My father passed away in the early 80s. This was years, decades after he had died. But he was standing beside me, and we were right in front of a huge old cast iron wood stove, and the stove was burning. And all of a sudden, he had this huge carp, live carp, and he throws it in. And I'm, oh my God, I was crying, I was so upset. And I felt this tremendous amount of compassion come from him towards me, which was a good feeling. So I woke up, and whenever I have a dream that has a charge, I mean, we all have dreams. Or some of us do, some don't. But 9 times out of 10, it's like, eh. The ones that have the charge, I write down. And what I do is I take the elements. For me, it was the fish, the ashes, my father, and the 2 feelings, the sadness, the compassion. And I started collecting imagery that reflected that dream. So let me share with you some of the source material. Obviously, a lot of my father's slides, thank goodness, my father had an 8mm camera and a still camera, 35mm, and he had a 2 1/4, a Yashica. So I dug up his slides. These are shots of the village, Kfar Kama, in Israel, that he grew up in. Some shots. These were probably taken in the 50s. I believe this is Tel Aviv. Kfar Kama was inland. It's in the northern Galilee, and I'll have a map in a while to show you where exactly. A lot of the old town is made of basalt stone. This is one of my cousins. So you don't see these people in the final piece. I use segments from the slide, another family member in the countryside. My father took a lot of photos of Israel and Palestine, of maps on the wall. I went over and visited in '71, and the Circassians are horse people. They all have horses, even to this day. So of course, I love horses, and they found a horse and got me on the back of this horse. I think I was 17 or 18 at the time. And then there are the fish. Any photographer, digital artist, has their digital file cabinet. And I collect images whenever I have a strong attraction. These were shot at the Chihuly show down at the Bronx Botanical Garden a couple of years ago. There was a pool in which he had some boats filled with his glass balls, and I was more focused on the fish myself, but it was gorgeous. And this was a carp pond in somebody's garden. I went on a house tour in the northwest corner and gathered files there. And then, of course, my father. I've taken a few portraits of him over the years before he passed. This one a cousin found for me. That's my father in the center at age 18, and his cousin. And this is a shot of my father when he was dying of cancer, probably late 80s, 1980, 81. So that's a little bit about Homeland 1. The visual memoir is a body of work that is always growing, and it investigates my psyche as well as the landscape we all share. I have this one piece. This is interesting. This is called Imprint 1. And the major elements are the sycamore tree, myself in the corner, and then up in the upper left-hand corner is a hand that's just blended into the tree. That's my mother's hand. And it's basically about familial imprints that we all have. And the funny thing about this piece is I created this in probably 3 years ago. I'm still being informed by the piece. I decided I'd do a little research on why I liked sycamore trees and what sycamore trees were all about. And I have to read to you what I learned, which was pretty exciting. I like them because they're always fairly huge, and that bark's always falling off and making that very interesting modelly look. The sycamore shows its process of growth more openly than other trees due to the firm texture of the bark tissue, which lacks the elasticity of the bark of some other trees. So it is incapable of stretching to accommodate the growth of wood underneath, and the tree sloughs it off. Yet the tree continues to live. And I saw that not unlike our human process of growth. I certainly feel vulnerable and naked when taking risks in my life. And as I break out of the familial patterns and override psychic imprints that no longer serve me, I feel like that bark. And yet I bust out, I grow half naked into the world. So that was an interesting discovery. This other piece is simply my vision of our collective imprint on our shared planet. And I had fun collecting a lot of imagery. There's Grand Central Station upper right, some wetlands down the street from me, skyscrapers, Bloodroot over here, more skyscrapers, and this was very hard shot. I don't have a glass floor to put a camera under to shoot, so I actually had to shoot my body 2 different ways, laying on the ground with my feet this way. That's how I got the feet. And then I had laid the camera on the ground and took a few shots, and then I had to play with how to marry these 2 images so it was in proportion. So the 3 most recent visual memoirs, which are hung in the wall, the brick wall, came out of my visit to Israel after 40 years this spring. Past spring, May and June, I was over there. And most people, when they learn that I have family in Israel, assume I'm Jewish. But as I mentioned before, I'm not. I'm Circassian. And the Circassians came from the Caucasus, which are mountains that span between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. In particular, my tribe came from the northern Caucasus, right along the Black Sea. There are 12 tribes, and this is the Circassian flag. Each star represents one of the tribes. My tribe's the Shapso. The Circassians were forcibly displaced in the course of the Russian conquest of the Caucasus in the 19th century. And that was particularly difficult during the 1862, during the Russian Circassian War. Many died in this genocide. And they were displaced. And the Circassians moved around, and most of them landed in Syria, Jordan, Turkey, and Israel. I have some relatives, and there are many down in Paterson, New Jersey area. But I wanted to show you my father's village. Kafr Kama is right near, it's in the upper northern Galilee near Afula. Afula would be to Kafr Kama, Torrington to somebody in Goshen. That's where we go for our groceries. So this is right about where my father's home village is. This is a photograph of the village in the 50s. Up until 1948, it was very dangerous to be living in the village because there was a lot of, well, essentially the Bedouins, both the Bedouins and the Jewish people would come and really work hard to get the Circassians' allegiance, but in very violent ways. It was very difficult. And they were very, the other thing that was going on, the women were known for their beauty, and oftentimes they would be stolen away. So before 1948, the women wore headdresses, some of my cousins, so they could hide their hair and their faces and not be abducted. So they were very happy. In 1948, when the State of Israel was established, they could feel safe, somewhat safer than they had been. And they're just fine now. They serve in the Israeli army. They're friends with both the Arabs and the Jews. In the last 5 years, my grandfather's house was turned into the Circassian Heritage Center, which was really exciting. I got to visit that on my trip. So, I want to talk a bit about these three pieces now that you have the background. Oftentimes, well, first of all, these images were gathered. The fire that you can see in some of the pieces of this work was captured on a drive I took to northern Israel to visit the Hula Nature Preserve, one of the first preserves in Israel. And these fires break out spontaneously. It's very dry in the northern hillside during the summer. And then that's a close-up of the basalt stone of some of the older buildings in the village. And then, of course, some of the older buildings haven't been rehabbed, so they're all boarded up. So I have some of that board in there. And secrets, I've entitled the secrets because there was, oftentimes I'd ask questions, and of course there was a language barrier. Many of my relatives speak 4 languages, but since they aren't talking English all the time, it's hard. And I don't know Hebrew, I don't know Arabic, and I don't know Circassian, so I was at a loss. But even when I tried, I felt as though there was a mercurial response to my inquiries. And underneath that attention, that felt far older than the person I was speaking with. And that's why I shared some of the history, because I believe there are imprints from, coming down the Caucasus and the struggles that they had. So this is just how I felt about trying to learn more. It was difficult. I'm working on it, though. This piece is openings, and I talk more about this in one of the cabinets in Woodson. 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th cabinet. This piece started out with 3 feathers. Feathers are symbols for vision, high flying. You can look down, see the big picture. And this was in relation to me learning more about my history. But by the time I was done with the piece, the feathers are buried. You don't see any feathers there. In fact, you see someone trying to get through a wall and a curtain sort of being drawn back. So the creation of this piece revealed to me that there was so much more for me to discover. And the opening has begun. My trip to Israel really opened up a lot of doors. I met some relatives I hadn't met before. We're in dialogue now on Facebook and also Skype. And the last piece of these new memoirs is Homelands 2. My grandfather planted an olive grove, and some of these trees are over 100 years old. So the trees that you see there are some of the olive trees that he had planted. The grasses grow in the vacant lots in the village. Everyone has a horse, and this horse was in a pasture right next to the grove, watching me take pictures, thinking I was kind of nutty. And the basalt arch, that's an archway that I had actually taken at my grandfather's home. And for me, this image tapped into the hope and the longing of people who've been displaced, that still hold their culture dear and practice it, but, you know, the diaspora heart. All right, we're going to move into restoration. And, you know, the visual memoirs require a contemplative kind of positioning, an inward gazing energy. Well, the restoration is far more extroverted. It's much more active. In fact, oftentimes I work between a visual memoir piece and a restoration piece because I like the balance of being reflecting and being contemplative and then going outside and really enjoying the natural landscape and following my attractions in it within that natural landscape. So, source material. Perspective, when I go out looking for subjects, once I find a strong attraction, in this case it was to the echinacea plant, I try to find different angles, ways to experience this plant that I might not typically experience. So I might lie down, I might get a bird's eye view of the ladder, but it's very experiential, and it's ephemeral. Everything's changing. The natural world is so dynamic. So I take a lot of photos to work with. And I'm very fortunate. I live in Goshen, and in the 10 years I've lived there, I've created probably 12 garden beds. So there's a little frog I found sleeping in one of my daylilies. Had I not followed that attraction to that yellow flower, I would not have found the frog. And boy, did that make my day. Just a sample of some of the subjects in the garden that I work with. The earlier works were on rectangular canvases. I had a lot of white negative space. I find that I always start at the center. It isn't a conscious thing, but center and work my way out. I find too that this is a echinacea flower. You'll see the completed piece after we look at some of the flowers closely. They're just an amazing flower. Each one is very different. And this summer, this is probably 4 years ago, there was quite a variety in the garden bed. It disappeared quickly. So that was the final piece with the echinacea flower. That's what I finally ended up with. Now, like in, I was house sitting for a friend in Cornwall and took a walk. I had my camera with me, and this walk was along a path that had many rocks covered with lichen and mosses, and I just took hundreds of pictures. I had no idea what I'd do with them. This is one of the earlier pieces. And eventually, I'll show you a few of the close-ups that I took to give you an idea of the source material. Eventually, I started creating what you saw, the final lichen piece. But it was fascinating to see what a variety of textures and shapes I could find. with the flowers, what I forgot to mention is that I shot them all in the summer and then I constructed in the winter. And I found that when I was constructing these pieces, I was starting to feel a restorative. I had this restorative response to working with summer imagery. And that's how the title of the series came about. Just the experience of collecting in the summer and in the dead of winter, creating the pieces. Now, Iris was the first piece that I started working with on a square canvas. And I continue with a square canvas. It feels more balanced. I also wanted to show you a bit about the layers I spoke about earlier. You know, I would construct one layer on top of another. I'm going to deconstruct the iris for you in 10, 15 layers at a time so you can just see how it came together. And you'll see I'll end up with one layer in the center, which would be my beginning. Now with Lupin, this is this piece I started experimenting with defocusing the flowers and leaves and filling that negative space with defocused shots and really using that contrast to create an illusion of depth. I continue along these lines with Queen Anne's lace and chicory. Now, this piece is entitled Wind. It's a series on the elements I'll be doing. I've only done 2 so far, Wind and Water, which is in the back of the room. Wind started out to be a piece about white pine. I love white pine for many reasons. The sound of, hear the pines in the back of my house, backyard. I love the sound, I love the smell, I love their medicinal quality. You can make a high vitamin C tea from the needles, and also the fact that it's an evergreen. But I went down to shoot and realized once again, I was following my sensory attractions. I was really blown away by the wind and the sound in the trees, and I had no way to capture the wind. How am I going to photograph wind? So I just started taking pictures of the pine needles at a very slow speed and defocusing, and the pine became the vehicle to convey my experience of the wind. Poppies, you know, I go out and I try not to have expectations, but you know, I went out and I wanted some crisp shots of poppies. And every time I went out, on Pie Hill it's windy all the time, I could not get a crisp shot. Could not. 4 days into it, I finally surrendered and I started shooting the poppies as they moved. In fact, I put my camera on a tripod and I started spinning it around, and I'm glad that I let go of the crisp shots, or I would not have come up with poppies. And I think this really conveys the poppy's attitude in the wind. And here's water. I was attracted to the reflection of light in water that was moving very quickly in a stream. And that's the second. I've yet to do earth and fire for the elements. This is winter red. I'm sure all of you have driven by wetlands. These are all gone by now. The birds have eaten them. But this winter berry grows, likes wetlands. It grows other places too. And here I'm doing the same thing. I'm experimenting with creating an effect, a movement with the zoom. I'm also using defocused shots and then crisp shots. Over the years, I've collected, my partner and I have collected many daylilies, and every spring, it just feels like explosions and confetti. So that's daylilies. The last of the restoration pieces I'm going to talk about is field. This is a field. There's a field that wraps around my house. It took a year to complete this piece. I shot elements in the field in all 4 seasons. This is my little cabin, and the field is all around it, about 3 acres, and you can see some of the garden beds going up to the house. So here's some of the shots. Summertime, well, springtime here. And summertime. We've got fall coming in. So, thank you for your attention. If you have any comments or questions, be happy to.
First of all, she mentioned so many things. I was reflecting back, and I was struck by the photograph that had all the dream journals in there. Don't know how long it takes you to write down a dream, if it's that detailed or not.
Oh, it's 30 years.
30 years.
That was just some of them.
But, you know, there are so many different sources that artists have, and dreams actually are a fairly common source of inspiration. But I'm assuming you don't necessarily illustrate your dreams, but rather they serve as a springboard?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I'll sketch a little bit. It's usually words.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then images come from that.
So does anybody have any questions or comments that you would like to share?
What do you use for a camera and lenses?
Oh, I have an old Rebel with a 55 millimeter.
That's the one?
18, yeah, that's it. I invested in the 200 millimeter. You know, I brought it to Israel.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to use it. Came home. I want to sell it. I just need something to get close-ups with.
Yeah.
I'm just in love with that lichen piece. I just thought that was amazing.
With what?
The lichen piece.
Oh, yeah.
It was just so great to see something that, you know, it's take it for granted, but it's just so great to see your lens on all of these different pieces. But that one I just felt was amazing. Just you know, just looking at something that seems so commonplace in a totally different way. So I just want to thank you. There's a lot to think about.
Oh.
Well, I do. All right. Anybody else?
I was just going to say that I'm looking at this shot, which I've seen before. Marlow and I have seen each other's work back and forth. But it reminds me of the cactus, the stone cactus, that our mutual friend Pat had. So they're very organic. That's all I can think of is that there's these giant, I don't think of stones as living things.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, I see that. Karen, by the way, the woman who was just speaking, she was one of, well, there were 3 of us that were roommates in art school. So we go way back.
Yes.
Way back.
The beginning of the dream journal.
Yeah.
So shall we adjourn? Have a little beverage, a little food, and we can talk with her more informally. Thank you, Marlow.